resource person is here already, and she is a former structured finance lawyer in London's equivalent of Wall Street, di ba? Grabe, bigatin. She worked with governments, she advised multinational corporations and investment banks. But she was converted and became one of Europe's leading experts and advocates for rights of nature, initiator of a European citizenship initiative to put rights of nature on the legislative agenda of the European Union. She is also the founder of the international nonprofit organization Nature's Rights and the International Center for Holistic Law. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to present to you another beautiful lady, Attorney Mumta Ito. Good afternoon, Attorney Mumta, and welcome to the Philippines. Welcome to the Rights of Nature PH. Okay.
Hi, thank you very much. It's really an honor and a privilege, and it's so exciting that in the Philippines you're starting this initiative for the rights of nature. I think it's truly wonderful, and I'm honored to share some ideas with you here today. I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation because I'm going to talk a little bit to give an overview, firstly, of what the rights of nature is, or how we're proposing it here in Europe, and how it fits within the systemic context, and how it serves to transform the way our societal systems operate. But before we do that, I would like everybody just to do a short meditation exercise with me, because when we talk about nature, we are nature, and we need to speak and to think of nature from that place connected with our interconnection, our interdependence, feeling that. So I'd like us just to bring a moment, to take a moment to close our eyes and just focus on the breath and bring our attention to our heart. And as we feel our heart connecting with the heart of the earth. And once we feel that connection with the heart of the earth, feel our connection with the heart of the cosmos. And then feeling our heart connected with the hearts of every person in this talk, everyone who's tuned in all of their different places. And then feeling our heart connected with the hearts of every living being. And every living being that has lived on this planet, and every living being that will be living on this planet. And as we breathe in and we breathe out, just to take a moment to notice that we are all breathing the same breath. It's a shared breath. So there are universal laws that govern all of life. And when we align with this, we create a cycle of peace, harmony, and prosperity for all of life. When we are not aligned, we create a spiral of destruction, as we can see in the world today. All societies that have ignored this truth have perished. The reason we're looking at the rights of nature is because we want to make a different choice. I believe we're at a point in our history when, as a society, as a global society, in order to get different outcomes for our future generations, we need to alter our course. We need to move in a different direction. And I believe that the rights of nature can be something that can help our society to reorientate. So I'm now going to share my screen. So the first slide that you see up there, that's our logo. So I'm founder of an organization called Nature's Rights. And as you can see, we have as a strapline, transform the system. So this is the very first point that I want to make about the rights of nature, that it's not just a change in law. It's not just a litigation tool, but the whole point of nature's rights is to bring about a systemic transformation. At the moment, we have societal systems, economic system based on infinite growth, agriculture that poisons the earth. We get our energy from fossil fuels in ways that deplete nature faster than she can replenish. And we're consuming at a rate that, that is not really sustainable and doesn't really consider the other beings that live on this planet. And if we are to resolve the ecological crisis that we are in, we really need to change the way those systems operate. And at the moment, law just acts at the periphery. So with rights of nature, we're not using law to act at the periphery and just and allow our societal structures to continue as they are, but instead we want to use law to bring about a different outcome, to change the way our societal systems operate. So one of the main points, and the point of that exercise that we did, was to show that we are all interconnected. We are nature, and nature is us. That when we talk about the rights of nature, some people think that we are talking against human beings or against human rights, that nature is separate and humans are here. And the first point that I want to make is that we are nature. So when we are affirming nature's rights, we are affirming the fundamental basis of our own right to life, because how can we have a right to life if that which gives us life doesn't have a corresponding right to life? So nature's rights are our rights. They're actually securing the fundamental basis of our own right to life. No nature, no human beings. Yeah, the other point is it's very much about reorientating society towards regeneration and providing a moral and legal imperative for that to happen. At the moment, everyone talks about we have to regenerate, we have to be sustainable, you know, and this has gone on for decades. But there's actually no legal framework for that to make that happen. Yes, we have the SDGs and we have policies, we have planetary boundaries, but these just lurk in policy, and so governments can take it or leave it. But if we take that and we put it into law, it means that it has to happen. So that's the difference. When we bring nature's rights into the system, we use a different system of law that says that, no, we cannot have an economy based on infinite growth if it results in this level of destruction of ecosystems. We have to do it a little bit differently. So, and it's a holistic and integrated approach. So like I said, it's not, you know, nature is here and human beings are here and they're fighting against each other, because and I will come to this as to how the holistic approach actually works. But it's very much taking a holistic approach so that everybody in the society should be able to win. And it's about protecting life over protecting interests. At the moment, we have a system of law that's very much about protecting interests. And when we talk about interests, these are mostly economic interests. But here with nature's rights, we say there is something more important than protecting interests and economic interests, and that's protecting life. Because if our interests are not serving life, then we're unraveling the very structure of what keeps us here, what it means to be human, what it means to be alive. So really, this is about bringing moral values into the law, that, you know, that there's something more important than just protecting monetary interests, and that's protecting life. So how does this work? How does nature's rights bring about systemic change? So here we have the iceberg model of current reality. So if you were to think of our society as an iceberg, all of the crises that we see, they're all what is visible, what is above the waterline. However, what generates those crises is what is underneath. What doesn't appear, that's the structures, the systems, the paradigms of thought, and then the consciousness that generates those effects that we see in society. So if we were to apply that here, we have the current iceberg on the one hand, and we have the nature's rights iceberg. So if we want to change the outcomes, at the moment, most of our strategies are all about crisis management. They're all about crisis prevention, or tackling the crises as they happen. So the tip of the iceberg, or above the watermark, are what in the current iceberg I call the degenerative outcomes. You have ecological crisis, inequality and poverty, pandemics, climate crisis, alienation, the sixth mass extinction, you know, all of these. And mostly our governments and NGOs are working, and environmental law and, you know, the other forms of law, they work on this area just above the waterline, on what's visible. However, we get increasing leverage the lower we work down the iceberg. If we can change things here, right down at the level of consciousness, change things at the level of the paradigm, and then that works up to generate different structures, we get different outcomes. So in our current model, we work on these. If we look below the iceberg, we see that we have at the deepest level, we have separation consciousness. Separation consciousness then giving rise to a mechanistic paradigm where the human being is separate from the rest of nature. And then that gives rise to structures that are based on, that operate separately from each other. So we have economics operating separately to agriculture, operating separately to energy. They all have separate laws. The laws are not integrated with each other. And then, you know, then you have environment as a completely separate thing. So everything is dealt with in isolation. It's fragmented. And because of this fragmented mechanistic approach, so we're treating the earth, we're treating human societies, even though we are complex adaptive systems, we're treating it as if we are machines, as if you put in this and you get that. But as we know, that's not how nature operates. Yet we're treating it in that way. And as a result, we get all these degenerative outcomes. You get ecological crisis, you get pandemic. It's not joined up thinking. Now, with nature's rights, we say we need to change the paradigm, we need to transform the system, and we also need to embody the change. We need to really be thinking differently. We need to be feeling differently. We need to be connected with nature, connected with each other, and connected with the source, you know. So we move from separation consciousness to unity consciousness, that we're all part of an integrated whole, like cells in an ecosystem. This then gives rise to a holistic paradigm, a holistic worldview of a living planet, the human being as part of the interconnected web of life. And that gives rise to whole system structures. So the whole system structures are structures that that work together. They fit together. They support each other. You know, so you can't have economics that is separate to agriculture, that is separate. You know, they're that you know they are all working towards. So our environmental objectives have to be embedded within our economic objectives. They have to be embedded within our agricultural objectives. So you can't have agriculture that then poisons the earth and so on. And then this on autopilot gives rise to regenerative outcomes. So you can have regenerative distributive economies, more resilience to pandemics because you have healthier people. You have greater health, well-being, and connection, climate resilience, thriving ecosystems, thriving biodiversity, and that would be generated by changing things at the root, the unity consciousness, you know, the holistic paradigm worldview giving rise to whole system structures, including whole system structures of law. And the law is what holds the systemic structures in place. So our economic system, our agricultural system, and so on, they don't just operate on their own. They all have laws that dictate how they should operate. And this is what we're saying. All these laws have to change. And by putting rights of nature in the system, we also have to create a framework that is holistic, within which the rights of nature can be implemented. So here, another way of looking at it is the degenerative cycle. So with the degenerative cycle...
Sorry to interrupt. Can you please share the screen, the slideshow? Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so at the moment we have a degenerative cycle. In the beginning, I spoke about the cycle of peace, harmony, and prosperity and the spiral of destruction. So here, this is how the separation consciousness, the earth as a machine, human separate from nature, the win-lose paradigm. It then leads to the mechanistic worldview, encoded in law as nature as objects, resources, and property, where law just manages the externalities of the system, manages the worst effects of our system without changing how our system operates. And that then legalizes, originally there was colonialism, enclosure of the commons, that gave rise to concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few, economy based on infinite growth, agriculture that destroys the earth, energy that destroys and depletes nature, and so on, which then gives rise to the degenerative outcomes that we spoke about, and that reinforces the separation consciousness and the crisis management mode. Whereas with nature's rights, we talk about the regenerative cycle. So we start with unity consciousness, which then gives rise to the holistic paradigm, living earth, human as part of nature, win-win solutions, where law then tackles root causes. So when that gets encoded in law as the rights of nature and earth jurisprudence, we're tackling the root cause of the problem, which is the orientation of our societal systems. And that then scales up our distributive economies, regenerative agriculture, renewable energy, ecosystem restoration. We have well-being indicators for progress, eco-villages, community renewal, robust biodiversity protection, and so on. And then that gives rise to our thriving ecosystems, thriving communities, prosperity, increased health, increased well-being. Now, all of these ideas are already working to a certain extent and demonstrated in different parts of the world: regenerative agriculture, renewable energy, ecosystem restoration. These are all like solutions that already exist. But with rights of nature, what we're doing is we're stacking law behind those solutions to scale them up. So here, I want to share our rights of nature model, our development model, if you like. So at the moment, this is our current sustainability model of the circles on the far left, with nature, people, and economy, where you have, you know, the three circles interlinked, and sustainability happens somewhere here in the middle, where they all cross. Now, the problem with this model is it assumes that all the circles can operate independently of each other. Nature can operate separately to people, can operate separately to economy. But in reality, the only circle that can exist on its own there is nature. So we say that actually, instead of three intersecting circles, we need three concentric circles to reflect our reality, because what we really have is we have nature. As a subsystem of nature, we have human society, and as a subsystem of human society, we have the human economy. Because without a human society, there would be no economy, and without nature, there would be no human beings. And so flowing from that, at the moment, if we look at rights, if we look at the current model of sustainability, you have human rights and you have economic rights, property rights, corporate rights. But we don't have nature's rights. So there's something missing from our current sustainability model in terms of law. And so if you were to map that onto the concentric circles, we're saying that you've got your corporate and economic rights within the context of nature's rights, which then has to happen within the context of human rights, which then has to happen within the context of nature's rights. So here at the moment, we have human rights and economic rights, and they operate against each other because we have an adversarial system of law, because it's only about protecting interests. And we also have the problem that human rights can only be enforced against governments. It can't be enforced against corporations. And a lot of the time, when it comes to the destruction of nature, it's corporations doing the destruction, not necessarily governments. So this is one of the main problems with human rights at the moment. And always you can use the economic argument, that, well, we are destroying nature, but, there's going to be more jobs and that will benefit human beings. So, it's benefiting the economics. However, with nature's rights, you can't use that argument, and really when we destabilize nature, we're destabilizing the foundation of our own life. So as far as rights go, we say that corporate rights should operate synergistic to human rights, and human rights should operate synergistic to nature's rights. So this is not an adversarial system of law, but a system where we look to root causes. So if you have a corporate right that operates against human rights, you've got to say, well, this has to be reworked, because the corporate interest should be there to benefit human society, not to be working against it, because it's undermining the meta system. And the same with if you have a human right that operates against nature's rights, you have to rework it, because because what's good for nature will necessarily be good for humans, and what's good for humans should also be good for corporations, because if that's not the case, then we have a problem, because we're going to be destabilizing the system like we're doing in the world today. Now, to take that one step further, to make it into a workable model, you can see I've taken the three concentric circles and made it into like a kind of wedding cake. And I've added a fourth circle around the outside of all of this, which are the planetary boundaries. So if we map on the Sustainable Development Goals, you can see it maps very nicely onto the three circles. You have nature, people, and economy. And you can see that they can all be nested within each other. And then adding to that, if we add the planetary boundaries, we have a really robust system for how we can operate as a society within the carrying capacity of the planet in a way that helps to bring prosperity to all. So so this is fundamentally what the main point that I want to make, and to propose this idea for your initiative in the Philippines, that the problem at the moment, nature's rights has come up piecemeal and sometimes as a reaction to unwanted development activities. And so it's not come in with the whole earth jurisprudence, you know, that this is what we mean and this is how it should be carried out. And so we don't yet have an example where nature's rights is actually used with the intention in law to transform or transition our societal systems into a mode of operation that works in harmony with nature. And so when we are making our proposals in the European Union, this is how we are presenting it, that it has to be a comprehensive framework, a comprehensive model that incorporates the SDGs and the planetary boundaries in law and not just in policy. And a few extra points. So some people, if you're a lawyer or, you know, somebody wondering, well, we have environmental laws, you know, don't we need to implement all of those before we start thinking of nature's rights? So environmental law and nature's rights are two different things. Environmental law is a crisis management tool. You know, if we go back to our iceberg, it's working at the top of the you know, the visible part. And it just manages the externalities of the system without changing how the system operates itself. But with nature's rights, like we discussed, it's a whole different thing. It's working further down the iceberg, and it's about changing the way our societal systems operate. So it's reprogramming our societal systems towards regeneration. So environmental law at the moment, we discussed that it operates in a silo. So it's kind of in its own pocket here. Laws affecting the environment and so on are in, you know, another pocket here, and they don't talk to each other. But with nature's rights, we don't take this narrow view of environmental law. We say, actually, environmental law is any law that has an impact on the environment, any law that has an impact on nature. So, you know, quite clearly, economic policies, agricultural policies, these all have effects on nature. And so all of these laws come under nature's rights. Yeah, so really when you bring this in the Philippines, you need to think also with an eye on integrating the nature's rights across all the policy areas. It can't just sit on its own as window dressing in the Constitution. It has to be integrated. It has to be put into all the legislation in the different areas as well. Yeah, so also environmental law has many implementation and design failings because it's using a mechanistic approach to manage a complex adaptive system. So the approach and the way that the actual thing operates there's a mismatch between it. With nature's rights, we say, no, we need to use a much more sophisticated way of working with law. We don't ask nature to adapt our laws. We adapt our laws to actually look at how is nature operating and how can we govern ourselves in a way that harmonizes with that. Yeah, and also in order to do that, we then need to develop more of an understanding of how ecosystems operate. So more research and development has to go into understanding how ecosystems operate and about designing in a way that operates to enhance the ecosystems around us. Yeah, so basically that's the crux of what I have to say. Are there any questions?
Yes, please, if you have questions, again, burning questions, reactions, suggestion, or even opinions, please don't hesitate to have them now as Attorney Mumta is with us. I think there were several questions, Attorney, earlier that were raised, and Ms. Yoli and Father Edu already answered. But in this case, we would like still to ask you to get a different perspective, especially in the international rights of nature arena. So one of the questions here is that addressing the sustainable development, especially in developing countries, has become more and more challenging over the years. With the holistic paradigm approach, what do you think are key points needed to effectively help address the sustainable development goals?
Yes, definitely. I think the first thing is to make sure that these goals are actually encoded in law and not just lurking in policy, because until these goals end up in the legal system, things will just continue. It's legal to continue in the same way. And in this way, we want to say that, there's something missing, that when we destroy our ecosystems, it has a lot of knock-on effect. I know there've been a lot of environmental disasters lately, ecological disasters in the Philippines. And this doesn't just happen out of the blue. If you have deforestation, you're going to get certain knock-on effects of that. And to bring a halt to it, the government in the Philippines has to get its priorities right. Yes, we do need to meet the economic needs of the people of the Philippines. And most of the time, let's face it, with the mining and all that, most of the wealth that is generated goes out to the corporations. It doesn't get distributed amongst the people. The people don't really see the benefits of it. So what we need is a different development model. And I would suggest that we have a development model with the rights of nature actually encoded into the legal system, and the sustainable development goals and the planetary boundaries in law. And then this will mean that certain activities will be illegal, and the government will have to encourage investment into activities that are regenerative and that help to bring the prosperity of the country, but in a much more progressive way that secures the economy, that secures people, and also secures nature at the same time.
Thank you, Attorney. Another question or reaction from Marcus Tipton. It is ingrained into law by the very politicians that are so often beholden by the corporate donors. Won't we just see a repeat of the current system with loopholes and other relief for the corporations while the people are held to account, like what we see with taxes in the industrialized world? It is the same governments and corporations making the laws that we have now.
Well, this is an issue that we have all over the world, and and by us not saying anything or doing anything about it, it is never going to change. If we start to demand, that our systems change, we are the ones who vote these politicians in. So we need to raise awareness. When we make our proposals, so for example, when you put forward your bill in the Philippines, make sure that included in the draft is the nature's rights development model, that you have, the planetary boundaries, the SDGs, all of that encoded in law. Yes, of course, corporate interests, and, as we know, the law tries to protect interests at the moment. We want the law to protect life. Yes, they will lobby, and, a lot of the time, the politicians, the corporations, they all have, they're all like interconnected. And a lot of the time they will try to make loopholes. But this is where we have to be astute and we have to be onto it, And yes, maybe we get what we want. Maybe we only get a little bit of what we want. If we only get a little bit of what we want, we've got our foot in the door. And then we got to try and widen that, But also, I feel it's also very much about a shift in consciousness. That what we see at the moment is this based on greed, and greed is based on separation consciousness. And the more we can help the ordinary person to transform in their consciousness, and also the politicians and people like that, and to start thinking in a different way, to start behaving in a different way, to hold ourselves to to raise the bar on humanity, the more these systems will start to transform on their own. But yes, I agree. We are, yeah, these people are making laws, and because law has become so distant from the people and institutionalized, we have to make efforts to try and steer the law in a good direction. And it may be an ongoing work. It may be that we don't get the full thing in the beginning, but then we may get the full thing in the beginning. So, let's make all the efforts that we can, and keep demanding until we get exactly what it is that we're talking about.
Thank you, Attorney Mumta. Yes, especially now, I think in the Philippines that next year is election year already. I think it is high time for us, the right time for us to make the rights of nature discourse a political or an election issue, so that we would be more active, we would have a more engaged citizenry in the decision-making process. But it's a long shot. We know how things are in the Philippines at the moment, but we still need to keep on doing things as we are doing it now. Another question would be, are we right in our perspective that SDGs are basically human-centered rather than eco-centered? Can we introduce this model to communities even as we engage the microsystems?
Well, the SDGs are something that's out there, and it's something that is better than what we currently have. The way of making it eco-centric is by bringing in the rights of nature together with it. At the moment, the SDGs don't consider rights. Rights are not really part of the SDGs. And this has been a major criticism of the SDGs. But if you bring in the human rights, the corporate rights, and nature's rights, as I propose here in the rights of nature model, as three concentric circles, that have to operate in synergy with each other. If you bring that legal structure in together with the SDGs, then that's how you make it more ecocentric, and the planetary boundaries as well.
Thank you. Another one from one of our dioceses in the Philippines, in Mindanao, southern part of the Philippines. How different the current sustainability model is. It really requires us to be more environmentally converted in order to meet up these rights of nature model. It is very much appropriate, but requires a greater motivation to do it.
Yes, and what more motivation than the fact that our society is falling apart anyway? And, either we can influence the change in a good direction, or we can just watch it further and further disintegrate. I would like to see my future generations thrive. And I know that as our ecosystems get further and further depleted, that's going to be more and more difficult. So, yeah, I don't really feel that we have the luxury of a choice. I feel this is the time that we all need to get together and to realize that our future is at stake, really. The future of humanity is at stake, and we need to correct our course. And that it's doable. We can start with things that we already have.
Thank you. Another from Father Edwin. Rights of nature is still not in the mainstream discourse, even for legal practitioners. What strategies did you use to bring the framework to people's consciousness, to convince people to change the prevailing paradigm, and particularly for those in power, business, and government?
Yeah, so, firstly, I must say rights of nature is also not really within the mainstream dialogue in Europe either. It has, the institutions have started to become more interested in it, though. And this has only been a result of being vocal about it, going out there, networking, organizing. I organized a conference in the European Parliament to introduce our proposal. We drafted a law, for the European Union, presented it to them. We started a citizens initiative to, yeah, through many activities, through a lot of public speaking, going and speaking in universities and places like that. So gradually, as more people start to understand what it's about, because quite often, and you'll probably get this, you know, people who don't know what rights of nature is about, or people who want to put people off the idea, will try and make it like it's a simplistic idea that hasn't been thought through, and that it's, you know, it's a ridiculous idea, and they'll try and ridicule the whole thing. And really, when people understand what it's about, they get that it's really important. Yeah. So, and also when you explain it, you know, with the model, for example, you know, with the SDGs and planetary boundaries and all of that, people can see, oh yeah, this is something kind of practical, you know, it's not something that is idealistic. But it does mean that our systems have to change, including the legal system. And so you cannot just take rights of nature and just drop it into the legal system as it is, because there are so many inconsistencies that won't allow it to operate. So yeah, so when you bring in rights of nature, you have to draft your law carefully, because all of the things that may oppose it, you have to make rights of nature override all of that.
Thank you. Another one from Marie. Have you found examples of legislations that are commonly upholding the rights of nature?
That are currently, yeah, I mean, there's the legislation in Ecuador, in Bolivia. There's about 145 different rights of nature provisions around the world. If you go onto the UN Harmony with Nature website, so this is a program initiated by the UN, and it's all about the rights of nature. You'll see they have on there all the examples of the different laws in different countries, different policies. It's in the IUCN policy. It's also, rights of nature has also been included in the UN CBD, the Convention on Biodiversity, in the redrafting of the framework. So they've included the rights of nature. So this is something that we are starting to see more and more, that the institutions are taking on board. And if the Philippine government really leads with it, and leads with this new development model as well, you know, it could be very exciting. I mean, really, the Philippines will be leading the way into a different future. And I see it just as a matter of time, because we are in such a dire position. We know that our current systems cannot continue in the way that they have been. The main problem is how to transition them into something else. And I feel that law can be really instrumental in that process. And that's why I'm working for the rights of nature.
Thank you again. There's another one that you're requested to comment on. The rights of nature law might be used to further marginalize the people themselves, to uproot them from their communities for the sake of conservation of nature.
So if you look at our rights of nature model, you can see that the human rights have to be complementary to nature's rights, and economic rights have to be complementary to human rights. So if it turns out that, you know, that people are, you know, that the rights of nature cannot be upheld because people are living there, then there's something wrong with the lifestyle, or there's something wrong with the way things are going on, because it should be that we can live well also whilst respecting nature and whilst operating in harmony with nature. Yes, if the human communities are going to deforest and are going to poison the earth and so on, you know, that they're inhabiting an area, and not to inhabit it, they've got to deforest the whole area, and then they've got to put chemicals in the soil, then of course it's not going to work. But I've seen many examples of biodynamic farms, of permaculture farms, of, you know, of communities that that live in harmony with nature and live quite prosperously. I myself live near the Findhorn Foundation, which is an eco-village. and everybody lives well. People live in eco houses, which are very nice houses. They have electric cars in the community, which are shared. So not each person doesn't have their own car. There are electric cars that are shared there. The community grows their own food, you know, so they have, and they grow it in organic ways. They're not using chemicals to deplete the earth. Now, why is it that our communities can't change the way we operate? You know, there is no reason that human communities should be displaced in order to respect nature's rights. Indigenous people have lived in harmony with nature for centuries, you know, and nature has never become depleted as a result of their activities because, you know, they're quite proportional. They don't deplete nature to the extent that it cannot regenerate, you know, so we need to be more intelligent about how we live in nature, and then we won't get that problem. And that's what Rights of Nature is pointing towards.
Okay, another one. And these concerns about, like, I think in one of the messages or TED Talks of Simon Sinek, when he said that we've got a lot wrong with global warming, we assume that people will just get it and act in line with the most altruistic aspects of human nature, but they haven't, and we haven't. And this, I think, is concerns about how the messaging is also being presented. So, from your point of view, and then from your line of work, how do we make our strategies, especially the messaging, branding, and communications in particular, how do we make it more effective so that everybody, especially like in the Philippines, where we're all social media savvy, but we are a very young nation, how do we make sure that people are engaged and understand also these things?
I think we have to talk about the need for systemic change. You know, that we are, people have to, it's an education really, you know, that society has to operate in a different way. And it's not going to operate in a different way as long as corporations that are destroying nature, as long as it's still legal to do so, you know, as long as our societal system is legal to have an economy based on infinite growth, and that is the accepted model, that it's legal to have agriculture that destroys the earth, and that is the accepted model. Within that, how are people going to act altruistically? How am I going to act altruistically when all of the people producing the food are poisoning the earth? You know, what altruistic, yes, I can make a garden here, but what's that going to do? You know, so for people to be able to act altruistically, we need the structures and the systems that allow us, you know, organic farmers, they need subsidies, not the people destroying the earth. At the moment, people poisoning nature are getting the subsidies. All those subsidies need to be phased out, and Rights of Nature within our framework, we can put that in. We can say that, you know, subsidies to industries that destroy nature need to be phased out and redirected into industries that operate in harmony with nature. You know, so we need to scale up organic agriculture. If subsidies are put into that, more people can work in that, you know. If, the same with renewable energy and all of that. You know, governments need to put investment into these things. And by having it in law with the Rights of Nature, it gives a legal imperative to say, well, we can't subsidize all these things that are working against nature, and we need to. So you can't just put it onto the goodwill of people when we are having to operate within a context that promotes the destruction. We need also the governments, you know, to bring in laws that make the context about regeneration, and the action has to be there. You cannot say we're going to grow our economies and we are going to, you know, and we're, you know, we're about regeneration. We need to have a different economic model, and we don't need to keep growing our economies in order to have well-being. And that's something that a lot of people have been discussing, and that's something that governments need to start taking on board, you know, that we don't need to keep growing our economies to have well-being. products have nothing to do with well-being.
Thank you. There is a lot of questions here, Attorney Mumta, and we are hoping that it's okay for you to read all of them. We only get these very rare chance of speaking to you, so please indulge us. There's another question from Kiko Pasensya. Do you think that quantifying or valuing ecosystem services be an effective strategy to hold the government and corporations accountable to their irreversible changes?
Well, this again, if you were using it as an accounting tool within a nature's rights framework, you have a counterbalance, because, okay, the way, these accounting strategies came in, it said, well, nature is outside the system. It's not brought in with the law, it's outside the system. And so let's bring nature into the system of capitalism, and we'll give it monetary value. Now, the problem with this is how it's done is key. Is it operating in a holistic, synergistic way? Or is it operating because it can be used to allow corporate actors to profit twice? You can profit on the destruction of nature, and then restoring an ecosystem somewhere else, and then you get biodiversity credits or whatever, for that. But it's like, an ecosystem's like a human body. That approach is like saying, okay, I'm going to protect your leg and your arm. And this is how the laws operate at the moment as well. We protect your leg and your arm, we cannot harm that, but I can stab you in the heart, and that's okay. It's like saying you can destroy here or you can destroy there, but, let's restore this and let's restore that. What we're saying is that it's about balance, and it's about harmony, and it's about changing the way that we operate. So if you can use the ecosystem, monetization of ecosystems in a way within this framework that I've presented, and I would say that you need a change in the legal system, you need the nature's rights framework, then it could be a very good thing. But also, if it's just only relying on that system within the current system at the moment, economics is key, so anything that makes more money goes, and so it can be a disastrous thing.
Thank you. Another one from Kuya John Dean. In countries where rights of nature exists, Ecuador, Bolivia, the indigenous worldview is still influential and is gaining momentum. What would be the major role of the indigenous peoples in promoting rights of nature in the Philippines?
Well, I feel indigenous people have a lot of wisdom when it comes to understanding ecosystems and living in harmony with nature. They have a connectedness that most people in the modern world have lost. They have a sensitivity. They can read nature. They can feel when things are out of balance. And so indigenous people can teach us, they can help us to reconnect, and they can help us to develop that sensitivity, where we can then feel in our bodies that something is not right, so I feel that that's, that they have an important role. When we were talking about people being displaced, at the moment, the people who are being displaced are indigenous people. And indigenous people are not infringing nature's rights. The ones infringing nature's rights are mainly the corporate actors. So, we have to get this straight when we draft our laws, that we are not targeting the indigenous people. We're not working against them. No, they're our allies. We are, and of course, no people should be displaced. But instead, the question should be, how can these laws help support these people? Mostly, where the forests are being cut down, indigenous people are being displaced. But nature's rights is something that would also help them because they need the forest, you know, and if the forest has rights, this can be helpful to them. Yeah, but mostly in helping us reconnect and helping us to, yeah, to understand ecosystems better.
Thank you. We should be asking the last two questions, but there is one question that we should have asked you the very first time. And this is from, and again, the Diocese of Dipolog. How did you start doing your campaigns? What's your story in starting the Rights of Nature campaign?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, for me, it was quite actually an organic process. You know, yeah, I can tell you a bit about my story. I used to be a structured finance lawyer. I worked in the City of London. I represented investment banks. And I felt that, you know, there was something deeply unfulfilled in me as I was doing this work. And in doing this work, I could see that, you know, what the end result of what I was doing, I would work so hard, you know, but the end result was that institutions that had so much money, you know, just had more money. And then what were they investing it in? And didn't rest easy with me. And so I left and I thought, what could I do? You know, um, I went on a spiritual quest, you know, and I spent a few years just focusing mainly on spiritual practice. I went to India, studied with some spiritual masters there in my own tradition, and as I did that, you know, I started to glimpse a different depth of reality, a different context for our existence, you know, on the world, in the world. And I could see how I could feel very much, you know, how we were destabilizing nature, and that we had veered so much from the path of what creates, you know, the cycle of peace, harmony, and prosperity in society, and also in our own lives. You know, how this these false notions of separation, you know, in my tradition we call it ego, you know, have led to have driving us apart. And so I felt like I wanted to do something for Mother Earth. And because I had skills in law, I thought first, you know, maybe I could retrain, you know, as an environmental lawyer. But then I thought, what if I go into that and I find myself disillusioned, like I was, you know, with when I was working in the law firm. So I thought, all I need is one case. And I was in the Virgin Islands. I got approached by the chief conservation officer of the island, and there was a major ecosystem, which was the major breeding ground for fish in the whole of the Caribbean. The government had given permission to put a golf course right in the middle of it to a foreign company. And nobody on the island would oppose the government because everybody knew each other, and, you know, nobody wanted to rock the boat. Although there were some prominent people who really wanted to protect this place, but no lawyers would help them to bring a case. So I was asked, you know, would you help us? You're a lawyer. And so I brought a case. It was the first case of this environmental case in this place. And at the same time, we worked with raising awareness, you know, and building connections. And we got the laws changed. So our result didn't come through the case. We won at first instance, but on appeal, the judge sided with the developers and said that the development can go ahead. But what happened was the consciousness had shifted so much through all the awareness raising, and also bringing the case made the thing stall. You know, the funding was pulled, the project died, and the place got declared a national park with a prohibition on any development. And so the development couldn't go ahead. So through this experience, I understood and I saw clearly that the laws are not designed to protect nature, that we need something different. We cannot protect nature effectively using the existing frameworks of law. The only reason that ecosystem got protected was because we managed to secure a different status for it. At this point, I was not switched on to the rights of nature. I was trying to work with existing systems, but I could see that, you know, this was a Herculean effort, you know, and something else was needed. So I decided at that point, you know, to quit law, and I thought, you know, it's useless. Forget it, you know. I mean, it's useless. I'm going to be a healer, you know, and I work with that, you know. And so I then, you know, I became a mother, and then one day I went to see a kinesiologist. They do muscle testing. I had a rash on my body, and I went to go check this out. And what came out of the session was that I needed to put together a project that brought law and healing together, that shifted the paradigm that our existing system was based on and was about the rights of all beings. And I should go away and do a series of meditations, and I will get a clearer idea of what it is. And so I did those meditations, and I jotted down all the insights that came to me. And then within that, you know, I would get like, one of the things I got was to work with a modality called systemic constellations. And so we did a constellation. It's a workshop kind of exercise that helps you to see hidden dynamics. And this was about holistic law. And we were looking at where would a change agent be most effective. And in this constellation, we could see that holistic law didn't have a place in our world until the law recognized all beings. And so it came as a flash of inspiration to me that we have human rights, but we don't have nature's rights. We need to get it in law. And this will be the driver that will start to change the way everything operates. And so in Europe, we have a way that citizens can propose laws. It's called the European Citizens Initiative. You need to get 1 million statements of support from across 7 member states, and you can propose something. So you know, I contacted some organizations who were working on the rights of nature, like the Global Alliance, and I said, look, you know, would you like to do this project? And they said, no, we don't have any resources, and, you know, why don't you do it? And so I thought, okay, why don't I do it? And simultaneously with that, I mentioned the idea. I wrote an article, you know, and published it, and then people started to contact me from all over Europe, and I started getting invited to speak at conferences. So I just, at this point, I didn't really know what to say. So I just told them my story and told them a few of the insights that had come. And then from there, within a short time, I had a team of about 45 people across different countries. And then from there, we just started to work organically and got more invitations to talk and, you know, and to write things and yeah, just organically. But what I found, what I would say is really helpful is to make connections with the people drafting the legislation, you know, so make connections within the institutions and try, you know, try and get the backing and the help of the prominent organizations, you know, and it requires some education because a lot of them, they don't know what the rights of nature is. So things like we work to get the rights of nature into the IUCN policy, into the Green Party policy. You know, working with political parties can be a very good thing, but some of them will do initiatives of their own volition, but most of them, you know, you convince them, put rights of nature in your policy or whatever, you know, and they do it because they want to help. But then they have so many other projects and things that they're not really, somebody needs to be like taking the lead, you know, starting initiatives, starting, yeah. So I would say, yeah, you need to, you know, what has worked for me is yeah, it's just working with, you know, gradually, organically, people will come forward and empower these people, you know, like empower them to spread it. And yeah, but having those discussions, you need somebody who can explain it very well. You need to get some influential people behind you and supporting you, you know, and make that visible, because a lot of people just, they think the idea is good, but they just don't believe it could happen. And so, you know, things like abolishing slavery, for example, or stopping colonialism, you know, they were also, you know, think of like Mahatma Gandhi when he wanted to get the British out of India, you know, it was a whole movement. But he worked with the people on the ground, you know, the peasant people. He worked with the people on the ground. So start with whoever is interested. Start with people who are already doing like things aligned with the rights of nature. So people who are into renewable energy, into regenerative agriculture, into all, explain to them this is a legal framework to scale up what you're doing, to put more resources behind what you're doing. You know, will you stand with us? We need more people to, you know, indigenous people sharing their wisdom, like bring their voices out, you know, be a platform where people can, yeah. And also the fact that, you know, the bishops are behind it. I mean, the bishops already have an audience, you know, and the Pope has also spoken about how, you know, we need to protect nature with his encyclical and, you know, all that. So these are all, you know, they're all things that we can use to support the movement and to help people to align with it. But education really is the key, you know. By just saying rights of nature, people don't really understand what it is, and they think it's against human beings, and we have to educate them that no, you see, you know, these biodynamic farmers over here, these regenerative, what beautiful ideas. Rights of nature is about scaling this up, you know. It means that we can all still prosper. People are afraid that, you know, does it mean we have to all live like an indigenous person? No, we don't. We don't have to live like an indigenous person, but we need our activities to operate in a different way. And also it's very much about redistributing wealth. You know, at the moment, most of the wealth is held with the corporations, very few people, you know, and by making business operate in a different way, by having different societal objectives, so it's not just growing the gross domestic product, but, you know, we have well-being indicators, and, you know, we change the emphasis in society, then, you know, there's going to be no more incentive to stockpile wealth anymore. You know, the wealth is going to be the well-being of the whole. So shifting this way of thinking, you know, that, yeah, instead of thinking my success, you know, I'm going to be successful and all these people can be dead, you know, that's not really a success. That's like an empty success, you know. Yeah, we're only successful when everybody else around us is also successful. And so, yeah, you know, it's a richer kind of success.
Thank you, Attorney Mumta. I feel that we have established a more emotional relationship connection with the sharing of your personal experiences. And we thank you for that, for inspiring us also. I hate to break this, but there are still two more questions. At some points you have answered them, but just the same, I would like to ask these questions still. From Ms. Yoli, how is the church in your country or in Europe reacting to this perspective? And from Mr. Bert Peters, shouldn't we get away from the monetary paradigm? As long as we live in such abstract paradigm, everything will look as if it is under control or can be fixed by the smart race. Imagine how we would look again at our surroundings if money is of no importance.
Absolutely. I totally agree, you know, that money is a tool, you know, it's just an instrument, but it's become almost like a god, you know. And I feel in this, you know, a lot of people have lost their souls, they've lost their meaning and purpose and connection. And we need to bring back a different currency of relationship, you know? This is our wealth. Our wealth is in our relationships. And so, you know, at the moment, law, it makes nature property, you know, it reduces it to money. But really, nature is rich with relationships. You know, it's we have a relationship with nature. We have a relationship with Mother Earth. We have a relationship with each other, and it's about valuing relationships. So I totally agree with this this point. You know, yeah, we really need to. Yeah, and we need to maybe, you know, when you said about the marketing, maybe like Rights of Nature is about valuing life. It's about valuing relationships. Life is relationships. Money is just, you know, it's an instrument. It's a tool. It's not, you know, it's like saying my glasses are more important than my mother, you know, or my laptop is more important than my mother. It's, you know, of course it's not. And similarly, we seem to have lost that connection, but, you know, with the Earth Mother, how can we say that, you know, yeah, all of these products that we have, you know, which are forming garbage mountains and forming, you know, the disposed plastics forming the size of a continent in the ocean. How can we say that is more important than the health of the planet? You know, the health of the Earth Mother, of the, you know, of all the birds, the fish, the whales, the, you know, yeah, yeah, definitely relationships.
Again, Attorney Mumta Ito, as what she has been mentioning to us, we are nature. Therefore, we celebrate when nature thrives, regenerate, and sustain itself. Therefore, we live sustainably when our rights, especially to exist and to live, is recognized and upheld with that of the rights of nature. But more importantly, that recognition, that purpose, and need to change must start from within. Thank you, Attorney Mukta, for sharing your personal story with us. Thank you so much. Such powerful shift hopefully also inspired and ignited more the fire burning within us to continue our rights of nature journey. Thank you again.